Everyone, welcome back to OTD Military History. Now, today, I want to keep this live stream relatively short, not too long. I wanted to talk about the Masters of the Air, seen the first two episodes, but more so to do with the comparisons I'm seeing. I get it, and I think it's natural to compare it to Band of Brothers and the Pacific, which came out in Band of Brothers 2001, and the Pacific's 2009, maybe 2008, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously, Masters of the Air just debuted last week. So I see it everywhere, and I've tried to avoid things like reviews, just because I didn't want to know, kind of what it was going to cover. I just wanted to kind of go into it fresh eyes and see what it had to say. So I did some digging afterwards. I'm seeing all kinds of reviews just titling in strange ways, talking about how it's a sequel to Band of Brothers, which I thought was just inaccurate. But I think it does misrepresent it in a lot of ways, making it seem like it's some sort of progression. I know John Orloff, the basically creator of Masters of the Air, who's worked on every episode of it and has been working on this for a decade now, wrote several Band of Brothers episodes and involved in the Pacific and all of that. And it's the same production companies mostly. Obviously, there's been some differences between 2001 and now with how all these things are done with streaming, because this is not an Apple TV, which is streaming and all that stuff. A lot of stuff has changed, while the other two were on HBO. It seems strange to me that this is something that's like Alex says right here, making a good point already, is trying to lean into this, and I get it. I mean, Band of Brothers is massively popular. Still, almost 23 years later. I mean, go on YouTube and just put in Band of Brothers, and you're going to see videos with millions of views, all kinds of stuff. Band of Brothers tours and run by the actors and all this stuff and behind the scenes stuff is still hugely popular to this day. So I get why they would want to do that. From a marketing angle, I get it. I understand better and better every day, online marketing and marketing stuff. I get it. Just what I want to speak to more is the historical stuff, in the sense of not a review of Masters of the Air and all the technical stuff and everything, or the filmmaking process and all of that necessarily. A few issues with things like this, the CGI, and get how difficult, again, that is to do, especially when you're trying to do these bomber streams and everything like that. It's not all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, to me, the issue lies in the comparisons that people make, and like Alex said there, it's something they're leaning into, but it's combining three different stories that don't fit together and aren't supposed to fit together. They're not being presented necessarily as a trilogy, indirectly or directly, like sometimes happens when certain filmmakers make movies and they're not a direct trilogy, but they kind of are, or they're related in some way, or they're trying to make a point overall or something like that. I don't think that's what's going on here. It seems different than that. And I think it is an issue with how each of the stories is seen, right? I think each of the series has different goals. I mean, Band of Brothers is obviously focused on, comradeship, camaraderie of soldiers, literally in the name, borrowing that line from Henry V from Shakespeare, and that whole speech, St. Crispin's Day speech. There's that. I think the Pacific is more about, the experience of war on the individual, what it does to the individual. And I think it does an excellent job. And something else, and speaking of the Pacific, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is a lot of people didn't like it. I don't really understand why. So I'd love to hear why people don't like the Pacific. That's one of the things I want to talk about, because I think some of that has to do with comparisons to Band of Brothers and all of that, which I don't think is fair. I think it was fantastically done. I mean, I've read Leckie's book and Sledge's book. Vassalon didn't read a book because he dies, obviously. Spoiler alert for a series that's how old now? He dies at Iwo Jima. So there's no book. The book's written about him, but not from himself. And I mean, Sledge's book, pretty true to Sledge's book. It gets Sledge's points across extremely well. I think the cinematography is fantastic and all that stuff. I'm not speaking again about the, the rivet counting and all that stuff. I don't really care about that because it doesn't really make a difference, I think, in the long run, really at all that kind of stuff. So I don't really think, I think it's disingenuous, what's going on with trying to understand these different things. People of, trying to put these different things together because they're the same production companies. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think it misses the point of what's coming up. I don't know really what the focus of Masters of the Air is going to be yet, right? They use the source materials and things like that to kind of draw from. I mean, we're only 2 episodes in as the point of this filming or this live stream, if you're watching this later. So I'm not really sure what the overall arching thing is going to be. I mean, it's on the way. I don't know if it's going to be about, the learning of war and things like that. We'll see. I'm not too sure. It's difficult to say. I mean, I'm a little disappointed in some of the things from Masters of the Air that I shouldn't be disappointed in, because I'm doing I've done what I'm saying not to do. Comparison, right? Like comparison to Band of Brothers, which has that whole episode on how the unit comes together. Or sorry, how the whole series comes together. They do that training episode, episode number 1, Gurahi of Band of Brothers, is just about the training. Whereas episode 1 of the Pacific, is talking about, Lucky signing up right after Pearl Harbor, and, Sledge wants to get in, but he has, the arrhythmia, can't get in. And then Basilone is, getting briefed, and you get that overview through Basilone and all the other NCOs. Get all that discussion there with Chesty Puller. So I get that they're trying to set up what America is going through at the time, and I get that, and I think that's the point, right, of that series, is it's showing the development. What the character development of Masters of the Air is going to be, I'm not sure yet. I haven't read those books, right, because there's a whole whack of them from those who are characters in this. A lot of them wrote their own stories. Obviously, the Masters of the Air book itself. Haven't read that either. Maybe in the future. I just kind of want to go into this fresh. So I think the bigger point overall that I'm trying to make is you're looking at different branches as well, and trying to think that these things have some sort of continuity. Yes, there is comparisons between the Army and the Marines. People are gonna, come at me for that, but they do a lot of similar things, right? In a lot of ways. Looking at a particularly niche unit of the U.S. Army in the Second World War with an airborne division, right? There's only a handful of those. They fight in a certain way. I mean, they're used as frontline infantry, as we know, and Bastogne and things like that. So I think getting a sense of that was done well with Band of Brothers. I think what the Marines did in the Pacific as well was well done, right? The island hopping, the different types of fighting that takes place depending on where you are, right? The fighting at Guadalcanal is very different than the fighting at Iwo Jima. And I think they portrayed that well. And, somewhat of the naval aspect, right? Some of the scenes that stick out to me from the Pacific are them going over the side, down the rope ladder into the landing craft. I mean, that has stuck with me. That's something that's always stuck with me from other shows and movies and things of that nature. So, I mean, I think they've done that really, really well with the Pacific. With Masters of the Air, I mean, we're only 2 episodes in, right? They showed, I cut right into the middle of one when they're in the middle of an attack, getting attacked. They did one kind of the whole lead up and everything, which I really appreciated, taking them through, literally on the truck to the plane, the checks, everything like that, showing how some of the stuff is done. And in spirit of today, I'm wearing a Lancaster shirt. It's the only one I have. I don't have a B-17 or a, 8th Air Force or anything like that shirt. Maybe I should in the future. But a lot of the similarities, right, between these bombers, how it's done with navigation and comms and the machine guns and all that stuff. It's really well done. I've liked that. It's pretty bang on to lots of stories I've read. All kinds of Allied air crews, in these 4-engine bombers. It's all similar. It's all very similar how this is done. Already seeing lots of discussion of the daylight bombing with precision bombing, as the Americans called it, area bombing command, carried out by Bomber Command. Maybe I'll get to that in a second. So I think they're doing a good job of doing that, getting the essence of what it's like to be on one of these planes and doing one of these raids. I mean, they've only done 2. They haven't done the big ones yet that we know are coming. There's the one, the raid in southern Germany. There's going to be more. I mean, and this isn't really spoilers because it's in the title sequence. Obviously, they're going to do Normandy because you can see the bombers coming in. lower than they would be, but low over the beaches where they're unloading the supplies. And obviously, some of these are taken as POWs, so we're going to get that story, which is something I'm very interested in seeing, because I think it's going to be done differently than has been done in the past for all kinds of reasons. But they're really going to show that, and I'm appreciative of that. That's what I hope happens. So, I mean, trying to compare these it's very difficult. It's difficult and it's hard to do, and then it set expectations of what we should and shouldn't see. I mean, the one thing about the Pacific that I would have liked to see, maybe this is just the historian in me, is more of the training. I mean, they show sledges a little bit. They don't show Leckies at all. Basilone is already gen trained, right? And then he becomes the trainer. Again, appreciated that later on. Again, I like that part. Getting to learn and how they're learning. We don't get that all here in Masters of the Air. And again, I know I'm doing what I'm not supposed to be, but I just would have liked to see that. I don't know. Maybe it's my own bias as a Commonwealth historian. I mean, Canada had the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, which I've done a ton of work on, and it literally surrounds Canadians pretty much everywhere, right? There was training fields all over the place, almost every community in some ways connected to the BCATP. So maybe that's just, my personal bias of wanting to see that a little bit. I wanted to see a little bit of that and how these guys learn, right? Because they do only do it really in a sentence or two. Oh yeah, I guess there's spoilers in this, but I think you already know that. I should have said that off the hop. My bad. Maybe I'll put something in the title or something. There's only talk about that once. Like there's a sentence like, most of these guys have never been in an airplane when they're flying into Greenland. And that's it. I would have loved to see some learning curve, something. I mean, that would have been great. I mean, maybe it won't fit in with the amount they have, because one of the major differences between Masters of the Air and the other two is this is only 9. The other two were 10. So maybe that's, you got to cut stuff. So we'll see what's coming. I mean, I know what's coming in certain instances. You have the, just the historic details and facts of the series, and all of that. There's going to be the POW experience, which I can talk about now, because that doesn't come up in the Pacific or Band of Brothers at all, right? And this is a common thing for those of the Allied bomber crews, no matter which nationality you are, of getting shot down and being taken as a POW. And those are all varying experiences as well. I mean, some escape and evade for a long time. Some are captured right away. Some are sent to more difficult camps. We all know kind of the stuff like Loop 3 thing, Great Escape, all that stuff. Some will take the Hogan's Heroes view of this stuff, which is why I'm interested to see how this is going to go. It's not a lot of, how do I say this, building up to something in a lot of ways with other POW stuff. It's always working to something. Great Escape, it's literally in the title. Hogan's Heroes, obviously, it's like a sitcom, so that's got a different, vibe to it and direction, and it's basically just taking the piss out of Nazis when all the Nazis are played by German Jews, which is hilarious. So it's just, basically like taking the piss out of the Germans or the Nazis during the war. So we'll see. I think this is going to be more in line with what the experiences of being one of these POWs was, right? Again, that's another thing that I've done a lot of work on, is the experience of these aviators who are shot down and then ends up in, these camps, and, how that all goes. I think we're going to see some areas I think are going to upset people, because I already know they're upset, right? We have the Tuskegee Airmen, right, are coming into this, right? They fly out of Italy. They're supporting operations in that theater, where obviously the Bloody Hundredth is not. That's going on there. So though we're going to come together in a POW camp, it's going to piss people off, because some people are just terrible and racists and whatever. I mean, there is a historical precedent for some of this stuff. Segregation in the U.S. Army is throughout the war. Doesn't mean people don't come together in different and unexpected ways, which does happen. So we'll see how that all goes. I'm interested to see what they play up, how the individuals interact with each other, because something in my own work and why I'm so interested in history is obviously the personal stories, right? What I like to do with the channel, as many of you know. But, understanding how people interact with each other, how that might change, how things go, what expectations are found correct, how things are subverted, because wartime has this, weird way of bringing people together and, all that stuff. All that good stuff. So we'll see. I think that's going to piss some people off. I will see how it goes. I don't want to comment on that yet because I've only seen the first two and I've watched all the other stuff, all the, the opening sequence and all that stuff. Yeah, all that cool stuff. Yes. Well, there is a Great Dominion here. There is a shuttle raid, but it's the, what is it? The Schwein Regensburg raid, right? Where they go into North Africa. So I don't think the Tuskegee Airmen are coming up in that. I don't know. I could be wrong. If I am, let me know. But it's just directions, right? Algeria, go to Algeria. That's not in line with Italy. That's more Tunisia and Egypt. And that's a distance. We'll see. But yeah, so I mean, we'll see how that goes. And expectations, there's always expectations of things are going to be done and what people want, and people are going to be disappointed. I know that. So that's why I think it's time to set some things aside to really get the best of the series. And when I say best, I'm not expecting this. Yeah, so it's before the Tuskegee Airmen, so they're not going to come up in the next episode at least, which they heavily teased is going to be that raid onto before they have P-51s, yeah, which they're known for, right? Yeah, Regensburg is coming up. I mean, it's got to be. What else would it be? It's pretty much staring us in the face, and then that's going to be a big one. So we'll see how they go about doing it. It should be interesting. But anyway, yeah. So it's not going to be that next one, but it's coming. We know it's coming. They keep showing it in all the promotional materials, and actors and things like that. We know it's coming. Anyway, yeah. So I think. Oh yeah, what I was going to say. Or sidetrack there for a sec, is expectations, right? And getting the most out of this. I know these things are not, these are entertainment first and foremost. They are to entertain an audience, to make money. I get it. I'm not saying they have to get everything historically accurate. Not everything has to be done perfectly. Uniforms, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Like I've read a little bit about how they're filming this. They had to make replicas. They're doing that sort of, not motion capture, it's acting in basically a motion simulator like they did for the Mandalorian, where this is like the plane, right? And then it can move. They call it like a gimbal, like for cameras. Same thing. So that's how they're doing it. So I mean, you can only do so much with that, right? CGI can only go so far, and this isn't space. It's just black and dots in the sky, which they can do for the Mandalorian, no problem. This is a little different. You have other planes and ground, and it's all daylight raids, right, which gets talked about with Masters of the Air a lot, and it's going to be talked about a lot more because a lot of people are upset about how the Bomber Command is portrayed in the RAF, and that literal boxing match that they have where it's literally one punch outside the pub there, which I thought was an odd way to do it. I knew that was coming. I didn't think they would do it that way. I thought it'd be more stereotypical, to be honest with you. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I think we have to set aside expectations a lot and to get the value out of this, because I do think these things have value in bringing people to the stories. Like a lot of you have already said, you watch The Pacific or Band of Brothers and you just devour the books that are, were used as inspiration, or Tangential, or, Airborne, or whatever, 1st Marine Division, or, the 5th Marines on Iwo Jima, or whatever. You gobble all that stuff up. So, I mean, that's where the value comes in this. And I think if we keep going Band of Brothers, or Pacific, it's not going to get the most out of this, because you're going to be expecting something that this is not, for just all kinds of reasons. Like I said, it's a different branch of service, so that changes it to begin with. This is bombing runs before D-Day, right? Also, bombing had been going on basically since the beginning of the war. All that good stuff. So I think we should really be setting our expectations aside and not be too worried about what was done before. I don't think that's a fair comparison and all of that. So that's kind of my overall message. Again, only 2 episodes in, and I'll get to the questions about that in a second. So keep an open mind is my saying, or my thinking with this, because somebody asked me, what are my thoughts so far? So like I will reiterate, I've seen the first 2 episodes. Watched them back to back when they got released a couple days back. So far, I'm still processing. I don't dislike it. And it's nothing to do, like I said, with the technical stuff or anything like that. I'm just not sure where we're going to go with certain directions of things and how things are going to be shown. I mean, I'm just not sure yet. And like I already said, big thing for me is character development. I'm just not sure what that's going to take on yet, how that's going to go. I do like the portrayal of, kind of the daily stuff that they did. I really like the explanation of how they go about the mission and what it means for the individuals, right? The pilots, the navigators, the gunners, and even the ground crew got included. That was great. I like that inclusion of the ground crew and how important they were. And this again is a blanket thing across the Allies. Bomber Command was the same. Actually, the ground crews counted them, planes as theirs, and the air crew was like borrowing them. It was actually the ground crews. So I like that inclusion because without them, nothing happens, right? You can be the bravest, toughest flyboy on the planet, but if you got no one to put this thing back together, you're going nowhere. So I really like that. So I'm liking it in that regard. I'm liking some of the things they're showing. I'm just not sure how much I like it. I guess that's the best way to say it. I'm not really sure how much I'm going to like it. Like if I have to rank it in terms of anything, more movies and series and things like that. It's obviously early, but I like it so far. And I do suggest people watch it because I think there's a lot of good to come out of it. And Alex says it here. Another thing too, for me is the impact on local communities, which is just massive. Because I've been doing I did a lot of research on that not too long ago. Obviously from the RCAF perspective, but looking at for a project I was doing with the RCAF Foundation about the number 6 group, right, the Canadian group, and that included impacts on people at the time. Like there's tons of crazy photos of them, literally when the war's over, open the base and having people climb into Lancasters and Wellingtons and all that fun stuff. And Halifaxes, sorry. But there's memorials still in these places. Marriages came from this stuff. Children came from this stuff, this interactions and everything. So to me, that's important because again, it is different. Going back to the differences, right? There's interactions with other civilians, right? Allied civilians, people who were not under occupation, right? Who have lived through the Blitz and all that other stuff. So I think that's an interesting difference as well because you don't really see that a lot in other stuff in the other 2 series that are, connected, quote unquote. So far I'm liking it. And I do suggest watching it. If you haven't, maybe wait till it's all done. If you're worried about paying for Apple TV, just watch it in one blow. Maybe that's what I would do. I'm just excited to watch it. And there's some other stuff on Apple TV I might watch anyway. So to me, it's worth it. So I can just answer a few questions here because I don't want this to go too long. So this is a good one. The explanation of what the U.S. Army Air Force was doing versus Bomber Command. I think it was done well, sort of. I think as best as they could because they're trying to take a storytelling arc without it being too technical. Because you have to appeal to a broad audience when this thing has a budget of $250 million US. You got to get people's eyeballs on it. So you don't want to go on and on and on about how Bomber Command started only hitting naval bases and not hitting civilian centers and all that stuff. And then how they're doing mine laying and recon sweeps, things like people won't care. They won't watch that. So you can't really talk about this evolution in a way. I mean, they explained it, I think, fairly well very quickly, the difference between area bombing and quote unquote precision bombing, which at the end of the day, there's almost no difference. I mean, the Norden bomb site came up, I'm glad only briefly, because that thing is probably the most overhyped piece of equipment came out of the war. They talk about the cost of that project in relation to, or the secrecy of it, sorry, not the cost. The secrecy of it in relation to the Manhattan Project and all this stuff and how it was making this massive difference when we know it really didn't make that much of a difference. And the end of things, I mean, you're still dropping dummy bombs from 30,000 feet. Stuff's going to go where it's going to go. Obviously, there's things in technology improves in other areas as the war goes on, which we might see. I don't know. Again, I don't know. So other than that, you can't do much else. right? There's an evolution there. That's what I was kind of hoping when I said the training stuff. I was hoping maybe they could like have worked that way in, as a way to still keep engaging people with a story, being like, oh, the Brits tried this, so that didn't work. So we're going to do this instead, right? They didn't really do it that way. I mean, I would have tried to work that in, but again, no one's hiring me to make a $250 million series. So I think it's good. It obviously could be done better, but in the circumstances, I think it was actually done extremely well. Yeah, so I know a lot of people. Well, we got a lot more stuff going on. Maybe. Sorry. Sorry. Do you think it'll be released on DVD, Blu-ray? Maybe. Maybe. I doubt it. Just the way the media is going. I don't know. Have other Apple shows been released in hardware? I don't think so. I could be wrong. If I am, tell me. But it's up to Apple Studio or Apple Studios. It's the first one of the major projects that's actually under Apple Studios. So we'll see. I doubt it, but maybe. I don't know. Maybe you can take advantage of a deal when they do Apple TV. You can do a free trial for whatever. I know they do free trials for 7 days. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe wait and then just binge it in like a week, a weekend or something. That you could definitely do. Yeah, so I'm just reading comments here about yeah, I mean the technical stuff can go over a lot of people's heads. It'd be too difficult to get people on board. Yeah, so I agree, and yeah, it would detract very much for the average person. Yeah, I mean maybe saying that they're essentially the same thing. Maybe that'll come. Maybe that'll come, as these things change, as the war progresses. We're already in 43 here with the formation of this group, as it's coming together, which they talk about. They only allude to it, and they don't talk about it very well, which I found confusing, which I didn't like. I was like, can we maybe not do that? But whatever, it is what it is. But maybe it'll come to that. I don't know. We'll see what they talk about and what events they cover as we, work our way towards the Normandy landings and deeper into Germany, right? Because they did a raid on Bremen and into Norway on the U-boat pens. So we'll see what they cover in terms of that. Maybe that'll be somewhere they'll discuss it. Apple is evil. Apple is evil. Oh, I didn't know it took a long time to get an Apple account. I assumed everybody has an Apple account by now. I mean, yeah, there's lots of complaints about the CGI. People I know who are watching it who are non-historians are complaining about the CGI. Not complaining, and saying it looks odd and doesn't look right and whatever. I get that. But yeah, that it is what it is. Again, it's hard to do this in this day and age, right? This is not whatever, even 20 years ago when there was more of this stuff, or when they did these original movies, even in the 60s. It's just going to be more difficult to get this stuff right in higher numbers, right? Once they get into these big raids, how's that going to go? It probably won't look the same. It's not going to look like we want it to. Anyway, so I don't know. We'll see. I don't really care, to be honest. I want to get into like the details and the repercussions of that stuff. It's interesting to see, but I'm not too worried about, CGI of a bunch of B-17s. It is what it is, and reactions and stuff like this. This is acting. They clearly are. Well, I think James brought it up earlier that most of these actors were probably not even born yet, or were very young when Band of Brothers came out. So we're expecting stuff from people born in the 21st century about how to react to a Falcon Wolf attacking a bomber. Obviously they're actors. This is what they do, and it's not going to be 100% what we think is accurate. And then there's just tough, like technical flight stuff, and I get that. I do. And the same thing happened with Band of Brothers in the Pacific, right? It was the same sort of, same sort of complaints that this isn't done this way, XYZ, whatever. That's not really what they're going for here. This isn't a training film. This is a series. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here, but again, back to my original message here is comparisons are not the best idea. So if you all have watched the first two, I would try to. I know it's hard. I mean, coming from someone who's seen Band of Brothers innumerable times, same with the Pacific. I know it's hard. Um, it's hard to set it aside. I get that, but I would try to set that aside in terms of getting something from this, because this series is out there, and goes overall for any of these things, right? And part of my work and how I inform it and what I do, because I see this all the time, right? And this is maybe a good closing thought here is people say, yes, these things are movies. And, I've literally had people say like, oh, if people think this is real, that's their problem. That's the thing. It's not our problem. It is our problem. People watch this stuff and they think it's real. And this is the reality. It's they think this is the real done stuff. And then marketing plays into this, right? Studios will hype up, oh, this is accurate. Look at all the work we did, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. This is really, historically, good and accurate and based on blah, blah, blah. And then people are like, oh, so therefore it's real. So with that said, people will see this stuff. They will think it's real when they probably shouldn't. Whatever. People are still going to think that. So I think we have an open mind about when watching it. Obviously, there's the entertainment value. Because again, at the end of the day, this is what this is about. This isn't about getting the history right. This isn't about doing that. It's about getting eyeballs on the screen to make money. That's something to keep in mind. Like, that's all this is actually about, right? This is what media is always about, is getting people to watch so people make money. All that stuff. You have to keep that in mind. But people will form opinions on this stuff. There's going to be bombing raids that is going to make a big deal, or people are going to make a big deal out of it. A lot of people are going to be discovering this stuff for the first time. Area bombing and obviously the shaky morality of it all. So that's obviously going to be part of it. But other than that, keep an open mind. Don't compare this to Band of Brothers. Do not expect a why we fight here. That may come, but don't expect it. Who knows? Again, the biggest what if for me, or question mark for me, is character development. What are we going to see here? I mean, we've got that cocky pilot thing that we expect, right? I've met some pilots and they are like that in real life. Again, not just, not dissing them in any way. It's just that's being a pilot is bloody difficult and amazing at the same time. So cockiness is to be expected. So will that change? Will there be a humbling? We'll see. I think, to me, that's what I think will happen. But again, I don't know for sure. I don't want to say for sure. But we'll see. But again, my big message here is really stop comparing Band of Brothers, the Pacific, to each other, because they're not the same. They're not the same source material. We all know the issues with Ambrose, with relying on, oral testimony from decades later and taking anything a veteran says as gospel. That's where Ambrose did so much wrong, and we're still dealing with that today in the history field. Pacific is based on memoirs, which again have their own issues. You can take notes at the time, all that stuff. So, we'll see. This is based on, again, some memoirs. The book itself, I mean, Woody's going to have John Orloff on at some point. So keep an eye out on that for World War II TV. I think that's going to be hugely insightful, where he can talk about how he came up with all this stuff, why he decided to tell the story this way. That'll be huge. And I hope Woody does well with that episode. I hope lots of people should show up for that. Hundreds of people watch that live, I hope. I think they will, because it's going to be big. But anyway, so I'd love to see what goes into that and all of that. And maybe the series will be near its end at that point, so we'll have a clearer vision of what it's going to go on. And yes, I know, James, it's the same sort of production companies. Yes, it's got Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks behind it. The writing is different, right? John Orloff wrote every episode of Masters of the Air. He didn't for Band of Brothers of the Pacific. There's different people involved, right? Production is different now as well between filming Band of Brothers and filming Masters of the Air. Like, they're literally almost two different animals. Again, I'm not working the industry, but I read up on some of this stuff. Band of Brothers, a lot of practical stuff on film sets. You can't do that with Masters of the Air, right? You can't throw up a plane and hope for the best. They have to use new technology. They have to use what's available for them to do this in the best way they see fit. So that's why I'm trying to say, yes, it's the same production companies, but we don't compare Band of Brothers to ET now, do we? Same company. You know, I'm not saying for you, James, but my point overall is you got to stop doing this. We all have to do it. I'm doing it in my own head too, and we all have to stop. Um, Production style, I mean, maybe. Sorry, I'm just seeing these comments as they come up. It's. I don't know what that necessarily means. I get what you mean, but I don't think they're the same. And this is huge to me as the writers, because being a historian, doing writing, doing this stuff, it's a lot different. And having different people in the room is very different. Like you're saying with the writers, right? John Orloff wrote all of this, where there were several different writers with all tons of different experience writing Band of Brothers and the Pacific episodes individually, right? Not that those episodes have different tones. For me, the two episodes, none of this is bad, but Masters of the Air had the same similar tone, right? Learning, new, and then Alex says, I don't think it's as in-depth as this, but that's where the little things we disagree about. And that's like, there was some humbling, but there could be more. In terms of that, we'll see. But other than that, yeah, I mean, to me, they are different in so many ways. Just because it's a production company doesn't mean it's the same. Doesn't mean even it's the same director doesn't mean it's the same. I was just thinking about this today. Like, there are all kinds of directors of different vibes and doing different things. Like Robert Rodriguez did Spy Kids and then like Grindhouse. Like, those are two different, or Machete. Like, those are different things. We'll see. I mean, it's just I take an issue with that. And yes, it's 9 episodes. Like I was saying earlier, maybe I missed that, but it's 9 episodes, whereas the original 2, if you want to call that what you shouldn't, 10. I do think it should be 10. I think it's a good amount to get into, even with starting later in the war, right? Yeah. Yes, they are similar in a lot of ways, but that's the issue I'm trying to say here, right? Is set that aside. Again, I know it's difficult to do. There's gonna sorry, James. Yes, I want to come to this because I just saw this. So there is going to be one with veterans. Okay, because that's an interesting point, and we'll extend this for a few more minutes because I want to talk about that real quick. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get it. But that's the thing, right? I'm telling everybody, including myself, we have to kind of dissociate that to get what we can out of this, to understand the series, and how people are going to view this, because people are going to take their opinion of Allied bombing carte blanche, even though, yes, the British are not in this really much other than a pub dust up. And you're going to say, this is how the Allies did things. And we're going to have to be like, well, hold on. That's what I try to think of when I think of these things. We have to still engage with this stuff, especially as a public historian like myself. We have to keep that in mind. Stuff is going to have an impact whether you want it to or not. And it's going to have a massive impact. And I know people have been upset when I've said this in the past. This stuff has 100,000 times more impact than any academic journal will ever have. And this is important in that regard. So this is an interesting point, and I will finish up here because it's already gone longer than I wanted. But I haven't heard this, so that's good, because I was watching this with my wife, and she says, I really like Band of Brothers, obviously, because I told her, it's the same people, because they had the veterans, right? That's how there was the title sequence, or the vets talking, and then the vets talking, and then the title sequence. It changed it up because they had access to all those vets back when they were filming this in, early 2001, 2000. Don't have that anymore. This is now 23 years after, almost, Band of Brothers. And 80 years removed from some of these events. We still have some veterans, yes, and some of them have watched it and said this is what it was like for Masters of the Air. We'll see. We'll see what that looks like, what they talk about, who they are. I mean, Lucky Luckadoo will probably be one of them. I mean, that guy is fantastic and was on World War II TV, and his story has been published, and he was fantastic in talking about that stuff because he was at the premiere, so I assume he'll be one of them. If that's how they're going to go with it, we'll see. But that's interesting. I didn't know that, so thanks for sharing that, Rob. I appreciate it. But yeah, and you're right, James. This is kind of a point I'm trying to make. Overall, is this is going to have an impact on how a certain part of World War II is viewed and how people view the war, especially now, a different generation, a younger generation that was not even born when the Pacific came out. So this may be their first experience in a massive way of learning about the war. So we'll see. But moving forward, we should try to keep these comparisons separate, because I don't think they do anybody any good, because they play into the marketing thing. It's not like I'm saying, don't watch it, because I did say watch it. But the marketing has a different objective than history. And people are going to take this and do what they will with it and understand it, what they will with it. So all of us out there who are really, the afflicted, as it said, of this stuff, we can think about this differently. We can go about this differently. And I think we should. So that's really all I wanted to say. I think Woody's got a show coming up now. So go check that out. Other than that, I'm not sure what I will do moving forward with Masters of the Air. Maybe I'll wait till the end. I'm not sure. I don't want to just keep repeating the same things everyone else is saying. I don't see the value in that. I'm not a technical guy, so I can't bring that to bear on this stuff, but maybe we'll do a wrap up at the end or something. I don't know. Let me know in comments if you do want me to do something here or after. And then we can go from there. But other than that, I got some live streams coming up starting, tomorrow. Nick Stanley's going to come on and talk about minesweeping, leading up to the Normandy invasion with the Canadians doing sweeping off Omaha. So that'll be cool. That's tomorrow at 2 o'clock. 3 p.m. Eastern time. 3 p.m. Eastern time. So, so come check that out. And other than that, I'll see everybody tomorrow and for more live streams coming up. And go watch the series if you get a chance. I think it is totally worth watching and getting Apple TV for, at least for the little bit for the future. So other than that, we'll see everybody tomorrow, and have a good rest of your day. Bye, everyone.